Oh, have a seat, sir. This is a very special moment for me, sort of in my life, that we have the chance to sit down with. He's a legend. I'm going to try to introduce him, but Jim Hightower is here, and he's exactly. Again, he's a legendary person in my life personally, and Bernie Pollack, my co-founders. He's a commentator, a journalist, a best-selling author. He's long chronicled the struggles that we're having with democracy in the United States. And he was twice elected Texas Agricultural Commissioner and currently runs the online newsletter, The Hightower Lowdown. I suggest everyone go immediately and subscribe. And it's really a notable publication because they do such in-depth investigative reporting. They give you all of the facts. So, Jim, thank you for being here. It's such a pleasure to see you.
It was my joy. Thank you.
So, again, I'm a little overcome, but I want to start off by talking about something that I know is very, very important to you, and it's the role and the huge impact that monopolies have on our food system, our food and agriculture systems here in the United States and all around the world.
Right. Well, it's kind of the overlooked issue in politics, including by my party, the Democratic Party.
Sure.
Some are doing it now because farmers and workers and others are stepping forward.
Right.
There's two levels of monopoly, really. One, the one that we face as consumers, and the other, the one that the farmers face as sellers to processing firms. For example, meat packing industry. Got four corporations control 85%. 85% of all the meat in the United States, and most of it in the world. Two of those are Brazilian corporations, and two are huge conglomerates here. If you're a farmer, say you're raising cattle or hogs or whatever, and you go to market, there's not 6 companies there bidding on you.
Right.
There's one, because they divide up the country.
And they decide the price.
Yes. And well, not only do they decide the price, I'll tell you a story. There's a guy out in Montana, Steve Charter. He's a 4th-generation rancher. And he saw beef prices going up at the supermarket, so he said, well, maybe it's time to settle a few cattle. It might be good. So he goes to the market with about 120 head of cattle, and there's one buyer. And it's JBS, the Brazilian corporation. It's the largest meat packer in the world. And JBS says, well, we'll take your cattle, but we won't give you a price until next week after you sell them to us. You've got to bring them to us and leave them, and then we will tell you a price next week. Well, next week, the price that he was offered was $1 a pound. It cost him $1.30 a pound to produce the cattle.
That's criminal.
Then he said, well, I might come back the next week, and they said, well, it'll be 90 cents then that you'll get. So it's just monopoly power.
Sure.
And there's monopoly, and the other term's monopsony, but who cares? It's the same thing. It's a brutal system that's knocking down all of us. And the pricing, one more example, you buy that family pack of a bucket of fried chicken at KFC or somewhere. That costs right at $29 for a bucket. What would just be your guess that the farmer would get out of that, the person who raised the chicken and sold it?
I'm going to have a different answer probably than all of you. Any guesses about how much the farmer would get?
Yeah. 58 cents of a $29 bucket of chicken goes to the farmer. The rest goes to the process, the middleman. It's a feudal system, basically.
Yeah.
An old sharecropper system, company town system, and it's running roughshod over good family farmers, consumers, and then, of course, workers, as we saw during the pandemic and the meatpacking plants, forcing the workers to go in there with no protection. And leading to epidemics of COVID-19 in those plants. They were killer facilities, literally.
Absolutely.
So anyway, so that's what we're battling. We're battling enormous corporate power that pervades our economy generally, but in food, it has become the dominant power.
Absolutely, absolutely. Can you talk a little bit more about I think a lot of us as consumers, as eaters, don't understand that this system is sort of behind everything. It's sort of hidden from us unless we're digging into your newsletter.
Right. Yeah, it's, increasingly because of groups like yours, consumer organizations, Ralph Nader's groups, Public Citizen, others that are doing terrific work of spreading the news, and consumers themselves are onto it about this power.
Right.
Again, I'll tell you a story of tomatoes. I've spent a lot of my life in tomatoes. Susan DeMarco and I wrote a book in 1971 or 2 called Hard Tomatoes, Hard Times. And it was about those little hard tomatoes in those little cellophane packages that were at the supermarkets. And that was kind of all that was available back then. Well, it turns out that the reason those tomatoes were hard was because Del Monte Corporation wanted a tomato harvester, a mechanical harvester. They didn't want to hire farm workers. And so University of California at Davis, the land-grant college, tax-supported college, made them a machine. But the machine squished the tomatoes. So they solved that by making a hard tomato that could withstand the squishing by the machinery, paid for by us taxpayers.
Sure.
And that led to decimation of family farm tomato agriculture in California, for example, and Florida. And then, of course, the consumer said, well, wait a minute, these things don't have any flavor. And Susan DeMarco went to interview the head of U.S. Department of Agriculture's research program. And he loved these tomatoes. He said, oh my God, you can ship them across the country. They'll last a month on the shelf. They're just wonderful. And she said, well, yeah, but they don't quite have that good flavor that I grew up with in New Jersey tomatoes. And he leaned over to her and said, your children will never know the difference. Oh. And that's the attitude that they bring to food.
Right.
That is just a thing. It's not a culture.
Right.
Which agriculture
absolutely
professes to be. And so then, University of Florida spent months and months and hundreds of millions of dollars trying to develop an industrial tomato with flavor put back into it, rather than just, say, growing a tomato, for example.
Right.
And again, that didn't work because it turns out nature's better at it than even our best scientists at producing flavor, so they couldn't quite get the flavor like. But you'll be pleased to know that now the University of Florida, working with H.J. Heinz and Company, is developing a tomato that can be grown on Mars because they think that's the future. So we're going to develop seed and all that, and then grow it on Mars and then ship it back here. I guess Bezos and Musk are going to ship it back and forth. I don't know, but
on their phallic-shaped rockets.
But this is called efficiency. This is called economic efficiency. And meanwhile, farmers are being displaced, farm workers are being displaced, small food producers. Of course, the reason things changed, though, was because that ag research director was wrong.
Yeah.
People did know the difference, and their children particularly knew the difference. And so we now have farmers markets, and we have community agriculture and all kinds of programs where you can get a decent tomato.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So people respond, and that's the good news.
Absolutely. I think my question for you, Jim, is how was this all allowed to evolve in the way that it has? Is it the lobbies? Is it the land grants? Who can we blame?
It's money. That's what's to blame. A handful of giants saw a way to invest in research done at land-grant colleges again, and the colleges say, oh well, but the companies pay for this research. Well, they pay a pittance for the research, and then they get the whole university program dedicated to them. And so the corporation decides what the university does research on, not the people, not the farmers, not consumers, not environmentalists. So the vast majority of the people are shut out of that system in order to produce a product that's a profiteering product by a handful of conglomerates. And they lobby the Congress, they lobby the state legislature, et cetera. But part of the answer to this is we have to lobby the Congress. The land-grant colleges work for us. And when they have their appropriations bill at the Texas legislature over here, we should be showing up, saying, here's our agenda, here's what we want the land-grant college to work on, and counter the corporations, and then organize farmers with consumers, with environmentalists, with workers, and et cetera, and be the majority that changes that. We can do it. And we are making some rounds. When I was ag commissioner here in Texas, among my duties on paper was that I was the pesticide regulator of the state of Texas, a state that makes more pesticides than any other and uses more pesticides than any other. And so we did it. We said, well, we had the power to regulate, why don't we try it? And so we did. And this upset the Farm Bureau, upset the chemical lobby, upset the industrial side of agriculture enormously. So they came at me to try to take away my authority as ag commissioner to regulate pesticides. And they had a hearing right over there in the Capitol building in a little room about a fourth of the size of this room right here. But they ended up having to move the hearing to the House chamber, the largest room on the Capitol grounds, because my leadoff witness was Willie Nelson, my second witness was Barbara Jordan, and my third witness was the chairwoman of the Dallas Women's Republican Club, because Republicans don't want their babies eating pesticides either. So we had the chamber filled. And Willie did his testimony. He said that he had been up near the Waco area where he grew up, in a town called Abbott. He said he's talking to his cousin Cecil, and he said, "Cecil, I hadn't seen a horny toad in years. What happened to the horny toads?" And Cecil said, "Well, the pesticides got them." And Cecil said, "You know what you haven't seen also? Where'd the jackrabbits go?" And Willie said, "Well, I don't know where the jackrabbits go." He said, "Pesticides got them." And so Willie said to the chair of the committee, "So I'm here for the horny toads and the jackrabbits. We want them back."
Right, absolutely.
And the chair of the committee, none of the members of the committee could speak. They just stepped back, and at the end, nobody on the committee would make the motion to take the pesticide authority away. So the lesson there is we the people, you can't win the inside fight. That's where money is. But you can win the outside fight. If you bring the outside in, then you can win. And that's what we did at that hearing and why we persevered.
And congratulations. It was amazing. It was amazing to read about. Being Texas Ag Commissioner gave you a lot of opportunities. I'm wondering what inspired you to do it, and you did it twice.
Yes, right. Insanity helped. We, being myself and Susan DeMarco and my friends and a few supporters, we actually had a 2-day retreat analyzing what office would make sense. Because I didn't want to run for office just to be in office. I actually wanted to do something for identifiable people. They always say, a politician will always say, well, who are you for? Well, I'm for everybody. I want to help everybody. Well, no, you don't. You can't help everybody. ExxonMobil, are you going to help them? Or are you going to help people who buy gas and people who work in those processing facilities and et cetera? So you got to make decisions like that. So the Ag Department, it turned out, had enormous authority that was not being used. Pesticide authority was one of them, but we had terrific marketing authority. There were no farmers markets in Texas at the time. This is 1982. And so I campaigned on. I had lived in Washington D.C. and lived 3 blocks from the Eastern Market, a fabulous farmers market up there. And I thought, why don't we all have this? And I remembered that my great uncle, had sold at a farmer's market in Weatherford, Texas. And I said, well, it just made great sense then. What did today? The Dallas News ran an editorial saying that Hightower was completely off base, that if Americans wanted farmers market, the free enterprise system would have created farmers markets. And so I adored that, of course, and went ahead and pressed for it. Won the election, much to the amusement of the industrial establishment, and then proceeded to offer farmers. We built a staff that knew how to create farmers markets, knew about consumers, knew about farmers, knew about workers, et cetera. And then we just sent them out into the communities of the state and said, anybody here want to create a farmers market? And we had 100 like within 6 months.
Wow.
And because people love them. And now we've got probably 30 right here in the Austin area alone. And so that's that kind of power. The ability to actually do something.
Right.
Politicians will say, well, I hold a seat in Congress. Well, it's not your seat to start with. And two, why are you holding it? Why don't you do something with it?
Right.
Maybe climb up on it and take on the powers that be that are running roughshod over everybody else. And so we did that. And it was great. We did. There was the Texas wine industry was just getting started, and so we were able to. We created food events in Chicago and New York and San Francisco and places with Texas wine, and I assured and invited the buyers, the grocery buyers and restaurants and et cetera, to come to this event. We had armadillo races and took Texas musicians up with us and made a big show of it. And I assured them Texas wine was not all Chateau Bubba,
Sure.
We were making some pretty good wines. And sure enough, they began to buy it. And in fact, California helped us. The California wine industry helped us because Texas was unwined with beer and bourbon. And they thought, well, if we could get them buying Texas wine because they're chauvinists, then they'd want something better, and then we'd sell them California wine. But they did, the initial wine industry in Texas was out on the Texas Panhandle, the High Plains, Lubbock, Amarillo area, and these California winemakers showed us how to string the vines up and everything, but they used wire strings basically, and they were not aware of our Texas thunderstorms, and so a lightning bolt would hit one end of that string and just buzz the whole bunch of grapes that were out there. So we had to find innovative ways to avoid the lightning. But anyhow, again, it was fun because people wanted to do stuff.
Right.
And my theory was that the free and free enterprise, the word free is not an adjective, it's a verb. You've got to free up the enterprise of people and connect them to markets so that their natural enterprise will then come out, but they're locked out of the market now. So we work particularly with Mexican American farmers and African American farmers who've been completely shut out of the agriculture department for years, and we gained their confidence by hiring a staff that was African American and Mexican American, so it has some credibility.
Absolutely. No, that's so important. And that kind of leads me to my next question. I want to spend the remaining time talking about why intentionality is so important in building a more equitable and, again, resilient food system, which we talked about before in a previous panel. But we need that intentionality.
Yes. I think we need it generally in politics. On the progressive side, we progressives tend to be, we react to this issue and then another one comes up and we run over there and we react to that. But the right wing is very intentional. They're saying we're going to take away your voting rights.
Right.
Then they set out to do it, and they're doing it in 40-something states right now. And you have to have that intentionality to stick to it. And that is what has led to any progress through politics in American history, from the anti-slavery movement, the actual founding of the country, then to the suffragist movement, for example. The trio of great ladies, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and et cetera, who launched the suffrage movement in 1842 in Seneca, New York. None of them ever voted. You know?
Right.
But they had the perseverance that 70-something years later, people could vote. And that's what I mean by intentionality. You don't go away. It is your intention to have a progressive future, to have economic fairness, social justice, equal opportunity for all people. Those are nice phrases, but they're not going to happen. You can't just sit around and wait on them.
Right.
You have to build them, and then you have to rebuild them because they take it away.
Absolutely.
But that intentionality is what we have to develop, the perseverance. Again, as Willie Nelson told me once, he said, Hightower, the early bird might get the worm, but it's the second mouse that gets the cheese. I'll let y'all just think about that a little.
That's great. I want to, you have been someone that so many of us have looked up to, and I consider you one of the bravest people in sort of this sector. We're talking about food and agriculture, saying things that other people won't say because they need to be said. And what I've seen from government and from policymakers and even some journalists is cowardice right now. And I'm wondering how we can change that.
Well, power is us. I mean, we have to organize, and there's really no shortcut to that. And again, the good news is not only are people organizing, but they're organizing across lines.
Right.
So farm workers are teaming up with farmers, with meat packers, farmers of color, women farmers. The biggest movement in the farm community today are women farmers. They're leading the movement into agriculture, but that's hard. And then linking up with consumers. I talk to farmers sometimes at the farmers market, and they'll say, well, we've got these issues and we can't seem to get people to pay attention. I said, you've got consumers coming to you every weekend. Why don't you talk to them where they are? Here's your potato. Now let me show you my pamphlets here.
Right.
And take advantage of that. So, and then of course the internet and other ways of organizing, but also to make it fun.
Right, and delicious.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it is agriculture versus agribusiness or agri-industry. And culture is literal in food because people, it's a community event, it's a festival event, it's a family event. There's music, homegrown tomatoes, great song here in Texas, and so many other. Marcia Ball singing of the gumbo and et cetera. It's just so wonderful, and it's lively, and so we should take advantage of that. It should. Politics should not be a bunch of committee meetings. It needs to have music. It needs to have music. It needs to have food.
Right.
It needs to have humor. And there's no Yugoslavian proverb, you can fight the gods and still have fun. Right. That's my attitude.
That's great. So I'm wondering, we've had a lot of young people cycle through the Future of Food events. What advice do you have for young people who are, so into food and agriculture right now, but don't always know where to sort of start?
Yeah. Well, start where you are. In whatever way you can. Just one, you can think of it. You can figure it out yourself,
Sure.
And that's the only way to do it. And you may have to start something new. We did when we started the Agribusiness Accountability Project.
Right.
It led to Hard Tomatoes, Hard Times, and eventually to my being Ag Commissioner. Such a thing didn't exist back then. And so a lot of what's being done now, including new food concepts,
Sure.
including food production concepts, and including, particularly including marketing. The internet has made so much possible for small farmers that was not
Right.
possible
Right.
before. They couldn't reach a critical mass of buyers. So whatever talent you have, put that to work.
Yeah.
Whatever creative instinct that you have, you can do it, and you have to do it because everybody else is old.
You're not old. You're going to stick around a long time. I think that young people, in the same way we talked about cowardice before, have to be brave and just do it, as you mentioned. They have to just do what they believe in.
Yes, and that's one advantage of being young is you're stupid often and have no idea what you're getting into, and that helps. When we were starting the agribusiness project and we were taking on Earl Butts, for example,
Sure.
he was Richard Nixon's Secretary of Agriculture, and Earl Butts had said that having fewer and fewer farmers to produce our food for us is not a bad thing because it leaves those people with something useful to do with their lives. He was the Secretary of Agriculture. So we took him on.
Yeah.
And we didn't, we didn't know what. You don't defeat cabinet appointees very easily. In fact, it's quite rare. And we came within 2 votes of defeating Earl Butts, again, because we put a coalition together of consumers with farm groups, and et cetera. In fact, there's a group of farmers out in the Midwest who had told me about Earl Butts. He had been an ag researcher, an ag professor at Purdue University, and was on the board of several food corporations.
Sure.
And so they knew about him, but nobody else did. But luckily, he had that name, Butts.
Right.
And,
That's great.
And we had the goods on him.
You did.
Of his connections and et cetera. And so we just went out and audaciously broadcast all that. And we lined up some senators and people and came close to beating him and did take the word agribusiness and make it a curse word in rural America. And again, it's a building process. That perseverance is really
Absolutely,
really what
and the
matters.
resilience that you've had as a human being.
Yeah.
Thank you so much
thank
for
you.
your dedication to
Thank
all
you to all
farmers.
of you for
A standing ovation, please. Thank you so much.